All-star voting has begun. Does Tyler Herro have a strong enough case to make the team? We'll break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about a hole in ESPN's reporting around the Jimmy Butler situation in a second. But first, we were recording this the day All-Star voting begins. You're going to start seeing teams, local media, start to push their guys, especially some of these fringe guys, right? I do think there are some locks. David, I think you know, Giannis, Brunson, Tatum. I think Jaylen Brown at this point is a lock as an All-Star. I think Damian Lillard. I think Karl Anthony Towns is going to be a lock going forward in this All-Star game in the Eastern Conference. Donovan Mitchell is probably going to be a lock too. Well, I felt like Bam Adebayo was getting to lock status. 2 straight All-Star appearances, Team USA, gold medal. It just felt like he was getting there. And now I'm not sure he's going to be a lock. I mean, his numbers are fine. You know, 16 points per game, 10 rebounds. The shooting percentages aren't great. Obviously, it started in a slump. He's starting to come out of it. But unless that changes in a major way between now and when these reserves are chosen, because Bam's not going to get voted in as a starter, we know that. Right. But he usually got the benefit of the doubt from the coaches, the players, got enough of the fan votes that he was getting in as a reserve basically every year. But I don't think that is a guarantee anymore.
No, it's a good point. And look, if you think about it from opposing coaches' perspective, who are they game planning for more at this point? I think they all highly respect what Bam does, and there's an appreciation because we've seen it with Miami and what Eric Spoelstra talks about Bam Adebayo and his impact. It's all about winning plays, and everybody recognizes the defense, the versatility, the playmaking. But in terms of how other opposing coaches strategize for Miami, I think we're even starting to see more adjustments made to try to mitigate what Tyler Herro does. And so if you're looking at the potential impact of a single player on the Heat roster and how opposing coaches view that factor, I think you're looking at it from, I'm more concerned about what Tyler Herro can do and the fact that he can go off for 30 plus points if I don't game plan for him appropriately, as opposed to, well, there's just this kind of appreciation for what Bam does, but I don't necessarily have to be concerned for him. So if it comes down, and it will come down to the coaches' vote, et cetera, I think you're probably going to see a shift in that kind of mentality from going towards Bam towards saying, you know what, Tyler might be Miami's best player at this point this season. And that being the case, he's more deserving of an all-star selection.
It's a great call, right? Because the starters, the coaching part of this, the coaching vote part of this matters less, right? And I think the starters, we know it'll be Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Giannis Towns, and then either probably Donovan Mitchell or Damian Lillard in that last guard spot. So that leaves it up to the player vote, the fan vote, and the coaches vote to decide the reserves. And we're already seeing this with Tyler Herro, right? Like, opponents are putting their best defender. Yes. Detroit put Asar Thompson, who's by far their best wing defender, on Tyler
Starting
Herro.
him.
Yeah. They started him and because they also had injuries, but started him and then put him on Tyler Herro. And we've seen this time and time again where they're putting their best perimeter defender on Herro. And then you're seeing them also trap Tyler Herro up high. Like, Tyler Herro crosses half court and defenses are already paying attention to him. They say, hey, if he even comes off a screen 30 feet out, we got to go over that screen. And it's a little bit how teams treat, Steph and Damian Lillard and these great shooters. So I think that's exactly right. And you look at his stats and they're just undeniable. Like, I don't even think you need to even rely on the coach's vote. 24 points per game. One of the 2 best 3-point shooters in the league right now. The assist number, he's averaging 5 and 5 with rebounds and assists. So it's not just like, he's not just Cam Thomas out here just putting up a bunch of numbers. Like, he's contributing in other ways too. undoubtedly, like we could do this if we want to do this part of the show, but you got seven reserves. I think 2 of them are spoken for by some of those locks that we already mentioned. That leaves 5 unspoken for spots, 5 open spots on the All-Star team in the East. And I've got, you and I started putting our short list together. We've got like 10-ish names here.
Yeah.
And I can argue for a few of them. There's going to be room for 3 guards as reserves. I have a hard time making an argument, and this is not just somebody who's close to the Heat, but like I have a hard time making a really strong argument for somebody to just like, yeah, for sure over Tyler Herro. Like I'm looking at LaMelo. The numbers are crazy with him. It feels like the kids love LaMelo. Like he's going to get a bunch of the fan votes too. So it feels like LaMelo's probably going to get one of these spots as long as he's playing enough games. I think he's only played 19 games, but I think he'll be okay. And then I think it's Tyler Herro.
Yeah, it's another byproduct of the kind of rampant parity that's been taking place here. Like you look at the top teams in the Eastern Conference, and specifically you're looking at Cleveland and Boston, and they've got all-star level players that are probably locks. 3 among them in terms of Mitchell, Brown, and Tatum. But you're not going to make a case for Drew Holiday. You're not going to make a case for Porzingis. On the flip side of that, maybe Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and Darius Garland are kind of considered there, but I think that's also, you can't vote all 4 of them in. I don't think all 4 of them are deserving from the Cleveland's perspective. And so maybe one of those 3 gets in alongside Mitchell, who's an obvious lock. And then you're looking at the rest of the Eastern Conference, and it's just kind of packed in the middle. Indiana struggles. Probably take Tyrese Halliburton out of it. His inconsistency specifically has probably put Indiana. Yeah, he's not
sort of like the guard version of Bam this year. It's like, wait, I thought you were going in this direction, and now it feels like we're going in a different direction now.
Right. And so you've got other players that are playing on teams with losing records. Cade Cunningham's numbers, I think, are so good that I think he's probably likely to get an all-star nod as a first-time all-star. He's a high draft pick, etc. Like he's been Detroit's best player, and they've made a slight surge in terms of their overall winning record this year. But other than that, you've got Franz Wagner, who's been Orlando's best player because of the loss of Paolo Banchero. So he's probably going to be playing there.
Well, when's he coming back?
Yeah, he'll come back before All-Star voting ends. Like if Banchero's already nearing a return, I think Wagner is going to be probably coming.
He's already played 25 games. The numbers are All-Star worthy. There's no question. It's just to me whether or not the availability and the timing of the injury hurts him. But he's already played 25 games. If he comes back by January, he should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, Trae Young's numbers have taken a dip. I think Atlanta's success has been mostly because of their depth and their defense, specifically Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson. He's another guy who has some all-star candidacy. So there are a lot of names there. Yeah.
So as you were talking, I sort of filled it out. I've got, as the reserves, the ones that we haven't talked about, I've got Tyler Herro, LaMelo, Jalen Johnson. I've got them as like my first 3 in. Jalen Johnson, he's averaging like 20, 10, and 6. Like he's been awesome for Atlanta. And then it's like I have Franz Wagner with like an asterisk. Like, is he going to come back soon enough? But I've got him in there right now. And then you've got one other wild card spot, and that either could go to Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler. Like all these guys, I think are in that. Like, we can't rule out Jimmy Butler. Like he's going to get a look by a lot of these guys, and his stats again. They're down based on recent years, but you can make the argument for that last spot. 19 points on 55% shooting, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Like he's right there with all these other guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's it might be a little bit of a burnout in terms of even around the league. You heard losing the name here, a former teammate of his, point guard guy who has on a podcast now talking about Jimmy. I'm sorry?
Goran Dragic.
No.
Jeff
Minnesota.
Teague.
Yeah, Jeff Teague. Yeah. Recently on a podcast saying, thank you for reminding me, Teague saying that Jimmy could be a top 5 player in the league when he wants to be. So it's almost like the narrative has been shaped so completely that obfuscates what Jimmy's numbers are during the regular season and his impact during the regular season. Because there's always this expectation that playoff Jimmy is going to rise to the challenge, and that's when he
do this, man. It's amazing that he's become this like cartoon character, this comic book character of like what he does. So he just doesn't want to be a top 5 player in the league. He just doesn't care. Is that and I think, and I even say this now, and I can even hear the Heat fans being like, "Yeah, dude, exactly. That's exactly what he's doing." And I'm like, why? You're in a contract year. You want to be a top 5 player? Go be a top 5 player. Go get your money. Go get paid. I don't know.
His
It's
numbers
so funny,
are
but it's the players who talk about him this way. Joel Embiid saying he's the best player. It's wild, like the aura that this guy has created around himself.
he's created a legend for
He
himself.
does.
Like
It's
even as it's playing
amazing.
out in real time, it's like the legend of Jimmy Butler is bigger than the name itself. And it happens to all of us. Like it happens to me. I still think that there's going to be another level for him to take his game to. And I was seeing even like in a Heat group chat, there were some people talking about his numbers during the Orlando bubble. Like we remember what he did during the finals, and there's no taking away from that. But like prior to the finals run, it really was like Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo and maybe even Jay Crowder contributing at a much
Tyler
higher
Herro.
level than Jimmy. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Tyler, having big games there. But we remember him bent over the stanchion, and we're like, oh man, this guy's the next coming of Michael Jordan. It's happened so because look, he had a great run when they went to the finals. He had some monster games before he ran. He obviously got hurt. The year before that, he had a good run as well with some really big games. So there is enough evidence there to kind of support it. But the legend has grown past the reality at this point. And so, like, even around the league, if you're looking at a coach and you're saying, why is Miami successful? They'll probably not consider Jimmy Butler because the expectation is Jimmy's going to be much better in the playoffs,
Right.
and so you kind of overlook what he's done during the regular season, which has been pretty spectacular so far. But so it's an interesting case all around in terms of like all the number of players that could get eligibility. We do this every year. I think Bam's out despite the league-wide success. I think Jimmy's out despite the league-wide success because of his own legend that he's created and the numbers that kind of sort of back it up. So if you're looking at a Miami player, and I think Miami's deserving. I mean, we made the case.
Yes.
We included in our short list RJ Barrett, other players that are on losing teams. I don't think LaMelo gets in, despite the big numbers, because
Really?
I don't think so.
He's gonna get so. I'm telling you, the kids love. He's gonna get so many fan votes. It's gonna almost like the NBA is gonna have to put him in. It feels
to quote the Jordan meme, "F them kids." No, I mean, we don't. they don't get a vote. I'm sorry that you're 15 and access to your parents' computer. Yeah.
He's averaging 31 points per game. It's just so hard. It's going to be so hard to leave him out. I feel like he's going to end up getting it. I'm not even arguing like how I would vote, just for the record. I just like the kids love LaMelo. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, ESPN is missing a very important piece when it comes to their reporting around the Jimmy Butler situation. I'll tell you what it is after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bilt Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Bilt, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. You earn valuable Bilt points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. And you redeem these points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. You can access unique experiences that are exclusive to Bilt members. Look, I love using the points for travel. Bilt makes it easy to turn rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, as so many of you are, why not make it work for you? So start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt, BILT.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use our link so they know that we sent you. And don't wait, start earning rewards today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time and their new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Whether you want to catch a game, comedy show, a concert, whatever you're interested in doing, Game Time has you covered. And with their Game Time Picks filter, it takes out all the fluff. It shows you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, and you know exactly what you're going to pay right up front with their all-in pricing feature. You just toggle it and it shows you the total right up front. No surprise fees at checkout. You don't have to worry about, whether or not you're going to get hit with this fee. No. You know exactly what you're going to pay right away, and you know exactly where you're going to be sitting because of their seat view feature. It's great. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. We're top 10 in subscriptions among teams on the NBA side of the network. But we're still behind the Boston Celtics, those dreaded Boston Celtics. Let's beat John Krause. Let's beat Locked On Celtics. Go subscribe, lockedondaily.com, to the Heat newsletter, not the Celtics one, the Heat one. All right. David, I want to play for you a clip from ESPN's pregame show before the NBA Cup title game. They're talking about the Suns' interest in Jimmy Butler. You tell me what's missing here.
Get Jimmy Butler. How do the Phoenix Suns get Jimmy Butler?
Let me get this.
Okay. Listen, I'm asking.
I think Bradley Beal would have to be involved with this.
But he'd
Okay,
have
now-
to waive his no-trade
Yeah.
clause.
Oh, okay. So this ain't just about what Jimmy Butler wants. It's also about, hey, Bradley, we're sending you someplace else.
So what sticks out there? What's missing there?
The discussion about the trade clause. I mean, he mentions it there. So other than that, just this idea that Miami wants to move on from Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
right
what about
away.
what the Heat want? They're talking about what they literally say. It's about what Bradley Beal wants. It's about what Phoenix wants. It's about what Jimmy Butler wants. What about what the Miami Heat want? That's my question. And that's the part that keeps getting lost in the ESPN reporting around this. So I don't know if this is just because they're doubling down on Shams' reporting that Jimmy Butler would be open to playing for the Phoenix Suns, which to me is the most non-story story. Like, this is ESPN has a tendency to report and talk about themselves a lot, right? Like Stephen A. Smith will say something crazy, and then that'll almost feed the next show and be like, "Can you believe this crazy thing Stephen A. said?"
Yeah.
Like, let you react to it. What do you think about what our own people said about this thing that is happening? This feels like this. Shams came out, reported that Jimmy Butler, or that the Heat were open to listening to trade offers for Jimmy Butler, mentions Houston, Dallas, Golden State, and then the next day mentions also Phoenix on that list of potential destinations that Jimmy Butler would be willing to play for. Then, of course, we know the story. Jimmy Butler's agent, Bernie Lee, goes on Twitter, fires back at Shams, calls the whole report fabricated. Heat fans rejoice in calling Shams a liar, etc.
Yeah.
My point this entire time has been, who cares? Like, you've got Brian Windhorst, Mark Stein, Jake Fisher, all reporting the same thing. And I do believe that the Miami Heat are... I think Shams' reporting is all true.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole soap opera around it has sort of created this weird situation where Shams has to double down on all of this, and it kind of creates this soap opera.
Right.
And I think we're losing the forest for the trees here in terms of, oh, well, now how could Phoenix even do it? And I understand we have to talk about Bradley Beal's no trade clause and all these things. My point has always been this. Why on earth would the Miami Heat want Bradley Beal? Beyond the mechanics of it, beyond the truthiness of the reporting, who cares? Like, let's just get down to, okay, let's say that everything Shams reported is absolutely true, right? Let's just assume that. Let's assume that the Suns really do want Jimmy Butler and that they are willing to trade Bradley Beal. Let's assume that Bradley Beal is willing to waive his no trade clause. Everything that they just said on that ESPN. Let's assume all of that is good to go. Check, check, check. The Suns call the Miami Heat. They say, hey, Bradley Beal is willing to waive his no trade clause. We're going to trade him straight up for for Jimmy Butler. Of course the Miami Heat say no to that. And that is not being talked about at all. It's not being talked about at all. And that's the part that's maddening to me, watching this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody who's kind of pointing to Miami's past interest in Beal, I mean, the scenario has changed so completely. Like, yes, there was interest at one point. There was interest before Herro made, as we just argued, an all-star leap. There was interest in acquiring him to be the third star alongside Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. And this was also a couple of years ago. I don't think there's any interest anymore. Like, getting him now to complement Bam and Tyler isn't realistic. So if that's the case, I don't see any reason why Miami would even entertain the notion of acquiring Beal at this stage and what they want to accomplish moving forward, if they decide, as you pointed out, to move on from Jimmy Butler, which is still to me a huge question.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? So again, you're making assumptions and then trying to think about the next step, right? So let's assume the Heat are trading Jimmy Butler. Let's just imagine a world. The Heat are trading Jimmy Butler. What would you want back for Jimmy Butler? You would want cap relief, draft picks, young players who fit the timeline of Bam and Tyler Herro, who are 27 and 24 years old. Bradley Beal is none of those things. Bradley Beal is more expensive for more years.
Yeah. He's
He's 31 years old. He's not the 30-point per game scorer he was in 2021. He's averaging 17 points per game on low field goal percentage, 36% from three. He's been flatly not good for Phoenix.
right.
You're not getting any draft capital back unless Phoenix throws in a 2031 first, which could be interesting, but you're not getting any cap relief. You're just stuck. You're stuck around a quote unquote big three of Bradley Beal, Tyler Herro, and Bam. Like, where's that getting you in the East? Nowhere. So if it was between letting Jimmy Butler, literally, if it's between letting Jimmy Butler walk away for nothing as a free agent and getting Bradley Beal, you pick Jimmy Butler walking away for nothing 10 times out of 10 because you at least get the salary cap relief and you're able to sort of pivot and rebuild a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I mean, look, you're absolutely right. Like, we're all thinking of this one, that Jimmy's exodus is a foregone conclusion. And almost certainly, as you've pointed out, ESPN and other outlets are kind of just looking at this from other teams' perspective. Like the Jimmy's actively being shot by Miami, when the reporting even hasn't necessarily said this. They're just kind of taking calls. They're not actively shopping him.
Right.
And it kind of just takes away Miami's perspective in all this. And it's like, oh, Jimmy's going to go to X team to help the Mavericks or the Warriors or the Suns in their pursuit of a title. Well, I mean, Miami saw themselves as a playoff contender, if not necessarily a title contender. And so it kind of just takes away a large part of what makes this argument work. So it's really interesting how everything's kind of changed. And it's a good point that ESPN tends to kind of just rally around their guy or whoever they're reporting, and just kind of just leans into it. And that kind of fuels the cycle of constantly talking about it, et cetera. I don't think there's any, I keep seeing this, and I just don't think there's much basis in it. Like, regardless of whether Sham's reporting is true or not, and there's probably good arguments for either case.
I think it's true.
Nothing is happening.
I think Phoenix is interested in Jimmy
might
Butler.
want him.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
But he's not said that Miami wants to move him either.
Correct. And everybody's leaving that part out. And that seems like the obvious part of the reporting on this that's not being done by the worldwide leader, right?
Right.
And we can kind of make fun of it and have fun in a segment here. But, as a journalist, also, I'm a little insulted. Like, hey, like, you're ESPN, you're supposedly the standard of sports journalism. And that's obviously not been the case as much as it used to be, right?
Yes.
But you're still, like, you're the one hiring Shams. You're the one that you're doing, like, this is part of your branding still. And yet there's this obvious hole in the reporting. Like, the thing that should be next is, do the Heat want Bradley Beal? Like, that should be a thing that's reported on. And it feels like that's not even a question that's being asked. And I think we know the answer to it, but that's not even the point. Assuming the answer and reporting on it are two very different things. And it feels like that reporting piece is missing here.
Sure.
And I'm not a person who gets, like, me, I don't call out other media things. I'm very reluctant to do this stuff. Like, I don't want to attack ESPN. I don't like doing that to peers and colleagues and other media entities. But in this instance, like, it feels like they have to be called out because it's just such an obvious hole in the reporting of it. And then it trickles down to us where we have to end up talking about this like nonstop, right? And it just and we have to do our part of the reporting on this too and set the record straight. And that's the part that, again, is just kind of, I don't think anybody's conspiring against the Heat. I think this is more just overlooking the Miami Heat, which has always been more of kind of how Heat fans have thought the Heat have been treated by national media and specifically by ESPN, just sort of overlooked, right? And in that whole clip, and I cut it short, I watched the whole thing. I'm telling you, they never bring it up. They never bring it up why Bradley Beal would be a fit in Miami or not. It's absolutely crazy to me. Anyway, there is a way that the Heat could make a Suns trade work. We'll talk about it here. I'll tell you what it is after this.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, let's say you're watching, a little Sunday action there, and you want to check out the latest stats, or you want to view live play-by-play, and so much more, you can do it all on the same page where you place your bets, but only when you visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. So, are we sure Bradley Beal would not accept being traded to a different team? So we're talking about the no trade clause part of this. And Miami, their willingness or not willingness to acquire Bradley Beal, and you and I believe that they would not be willing to acquire Bradley Beal and the $160 million he's owed or whatever it is. Maybe there's a third team that can get involved here where you reroute Bradley Beal to that team, and then that mystery team sends stuff back to Miami that Miami would actually want. The idea of him waiting his no trade clause, it always feels impossible until it happens. And we that happens all the time, just like in general, right? Where you're like, okay, this thing feels impossible, and then it happens, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't see this coming. And we see this with contracts in the NBL. We saw it the first time Bradley Beal got traded. No way he waives his no trade clause, and then next thing you know, he's waiving it, getting shipped away from Washington, and going to Phoenix. When it made it clear that they wanted to move on, and if the Suns are making it clear, and part of me wonders if some of this reporting is the Suns leaking it so that Bradley Beal sees it, because he hears this, he's reading all about this. He's like, oh, maybe they're making it feel like Bradley Beal's not wanted in Phoenix. Again, I have no reporting, complete speculation here, but this might be the way for them to get Beal to be like, hey, you're not wanted here, waive that no trade clause, go somewhere else. And then also he can look around and be like, hey, Kevin Durant's in and out of the lineup. We're basically a 500 team. The Suns are 5-5 in their last 10 games. We're not better than, the Thunder, the Wolves, the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Rockets. Like, we're not competing with these teams. I'm not ruling out Bradley Beal just waiving his no trade clause to go anywhere besides Miami. And so if the Heat could get a third team involved, if the Heat and Suns could get a third team involved to take Bradley Beal, that's where I think this would get interesting. So I'm not, again, no reporting on this, totally speculative, reading the tea leaves, looking at Bradley Beal's history, looking at the way Phoenix is behaving right now. And I'm just wondering, hey, is there, we could talk about destinations. We don't necessarily have to do that. But, the idea of Beal waiving that no trade clause, going somewhere else that's moderately, he's not going to go play for Utah. You know what I mean? But he'll go play somewhere competitive, potentially. A team that can use him, maybe. I don't know. And then that team sends something back to Miami.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, just trying to even guess, because I don't think we're going to get any kind of clarity from Beal. He's not going to offer anything. I'm sure he's going to be on record as saying that he would prefer to compete for a chance at a title in Phoenix. I think he wants to win. I think he really just wanted to get out of Washington, which was a bleak situation and had been for the majority of his career. He wasn't doing much winning. He wasn't able to really do much of note. He put up some good individual numbers. He obviously got rewarded with a nice hefty contract. I think if you were ranking his priorities, again, this is just be my guess. He wants to continue getting paid. So
that's going to happen. Contract's guaranteed.
Yeah, so that's going to happen, right? The contract is guaranteed. He would have to accept a no trade. He would have to waive his no trade clause so that he could get, some move somewhere. I just don't think, looking at the possible teams that might take him on, as you said, it wouldn't be to go to a lottery bound team and just collect $60 million and stay there and be miserable for the rest of his NBA career. He wants to be able to contribute to winning. It hasn't worked out the way he expected it to in Phoenix. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of good options out there for him.
There's not. The Rob Mahoney over at The Ringer floated out like a week ago. What if Detroit was like a third team that can get involved? I, again, have a hard time seeing Beal being like, yeah, trade me to Detroit. It's just not necessarily a place that NBA players have flocked to in free agency. But again, who knows? Like, he might feel wanted there. They could use his spacing. They could use like the outside shooting. Like, he actually would fit on that roster.
Would Detroit prefer him over Jaden Ivey? Would they move Ivey back to the bench?
That's a great. You could start maybe Cunningham, Ivey, and Beal, right? Like, you could start all three of those guys because Cunningham at least has the size. Yeah. I mean, that's a Pistons problem. I don't remember exactly what Mahoney proposed would go back to Miami. I don't know if it's like it's probably like a Tobias Harris is expiring based package where Miami's basically getting cap space next summer. So you're basically trading Jimmy, not getting Beal and acquiring cap space, which according to the reporting, like that, and I believe that the Miami Heat would prioritize cap space maybe above everything else if they were moving on from Jimmy. So yeah, I mean, that's feasible. I think about other teams like Houston at least has the stuff like I think they would just rather just trade for Butler than add Beal. You know what I mean? Like that. So that sort of falls apart. Denver has been in the mix for Zach LaVine. Beal is sort of a similar. They could just trade for Zach LaVine, not have to deal with Beal. LaVine's a better player than Beal is right now. So if they were going to go that route, the Clippers, they didn't want to give Paul George that contract. Are they going to want to give Beal that contract? I don't know.
Same issues: availability, inconsistency. Like, I mean, maybe a poor fit too. Like, it's just not. I mean, George was a better fit in LA, and he was basically escorted out of town and be like, "Oh, thanks for your contribution. Thank you for your service. Have fun in Philadelphia."
Would Sacramento move some deck chairs and be like, you know what, the DeMar DeRozan thing hasn't quite worked the way we wanted it to. The Heat were interested in DeRozan. Again, Completely speculative. Like you send DeRozan and something else back to Miami, they get Beal, who could kind of play next to De'Aaron Fox as a shooter, floor spacer. San Antonio is at 500. They're 13-13. Add Beal to Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it would have to be one of those like younger teams that aren't, that haven't had paid their superstars yet, so they can almost afford to overpay another guy.
Right.
But they're not bad. They're like kind of on that fringe, like those kinds of teams. But Atlanta, like they just got out of bad contracts. I can't see them making that kind of deal. So I look at like that's I kind of go back to like the Detroit, San Antonio, like these fringy teams are a little bit more competitive than they thought they were going to be. Maybe taking a swing at a veteran who's well respected. Bradley Beal is well respected across the NBA.
No doubt.
So I don't know.
But
Just an
he's
option
just not a
out there.
$60 million a year player. He's not gonna make a $60 million swing to any roster that he gets added to. Like he's a fine enough fit alongside Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, but he's not really carrying them to the promised land. He's just basically chipping in, and they don't want to chip. They don't want him to just chip in at that kind of salary, and neither is Miami.
Tomorrow, we're going to move on past the Jimmy Butler part of this conversation, but we are going to still talk about trades. Are the Miami Heat buyers or are they sellers at the trade deadline? What Friday night's game against the Oklahoma City Thunder could mean for the Heat standing as they approach the trade deadline. For now, that'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.